Okay, hi everybody, this is Pause Player from the GS Resources, and the first set of orders for the solid-state power box have been sent out, and if you've gotten yours so far, you probably will recognize this little assemblage of parts. The solid-state power box basically comes with the primary wires pre-installed. That's again, the primary wires are these red wires. One is for the main connection to the battery. It includes a 15 amp fuse in this holder. Then there is an additional wire that is again red primary, that goes to the RR plus side, and you would normally directly solder this to your RR. Again, the whole idea of the solid-state power box is to get rid of any connection to the harness, and we're basically making the power box an integral unit to the RR. The other wire here is a single point ground wire that provides the ground reference for the unit. There are two LEDs. The white LED comes on. It's actually a green LED when the unit is powered, and then the red LED flashes anytime there is a fault occurring. Mainly in this case, it recognizes when one of your lines gets grounded, and it'll beep, and the light will flash. It's dependent, largely on how the internal devices detect that short condition, and they thermally cycle. So it's not something that's a steady flash, but you can usually tell it's flashing and whizzing, as it were. The other things that come with the package are there's actually one of two options. You either get a pigtail if you requested that. You didn't feel comfortable with crimping the pins onto the 10-pin Molex. So what I did is I crimped those onto these pigtails, and then you'll have to basically strip these wires back and attach them to the wires on your harness. Again, here I've included in the kits for those people who want to do their own crimps. There's normally 10 pins. I've thrown in a few extra to make sure that you get a little practice. There are kind of small pins, but and I'm not exactly sure if you can use a pair of vice grips to crimp these on, so hopefully you've got something better than that. But it's not impossible probably to do it with a set of vice grips, or not vice grips, but needle nose pliers. But hopefully you've got something better than that. I've also thrown in a couple of screws here for those of you who ordered a solid-state power box with the heatsink having tabs. This is a diagonal tab unit. So the heatsink is aluminum. It's a I believe it's a 3/16 inch thick aluminum. Then there's a part of the case, the plastic case, is bonded to that with a conductive epoxy. So normally there's 4 screws here. They need to come out about 1/4 of an inch. So I've got just a single screw remaining. When you pull this off, you'll see that the primary wires are coming out the side, and they're directly attached to the PC board that's inside. There's also effectively some nice strain relief on the service loop for the LEDs. So generally, this is about as far as you need to take it off. You can get the grommet hole is slotted, so you can get that off, but just be careful about ripping the wires. These are not. There's 4 of them. They're wires for the LED, but and they're relatively robust. But really, there's no reason to go on beyond this. So the only things that are necessary to change here are these 3 jumpers. The jumper on the right-hand side. So if you're holding this so that the lettering is right side up. I don't know if we can still see this now. Let me pull this light forward and get this. Okay, that's probably about as good as we're going to get. This first jumper on the right-hand side is marked as either ignition or external. So what that means is if it's in the up position, it's a 3-position jumper, which is for ignition. That means that the auxiliary output comes on with the ignition. Pretty straightforward. If you don't want it on at all, like you don't have that accessory tied to anything, that you can just hook it onto one of the pins so that you're not jumpering either the upper pair or the lower pair. Then that actually turns it off. It won't come on. So alternatively, if you go to you say you have some driving lights and you want to turn your driving lights on with a high side control, what you do is you go down to the put the jumper on the lower, which is external, and you'll need this other pair of jumpers to be on the upper side, which is marked high. If we can pick that up in the video, there's a high and low. So these, and there's boxes around these indicating what pair goes together. So I'm going to use a pair of small needle nose pliers here, curved needle nose pliers. So I've just jumpered the upper two. I probably should maybe turn this around so it's clear that these two pair go together. These are just standard little jumpers. They have little tabs on them, so they're a little easier to grab. So the upper two are set to indicate high side control, and the extreme right jumper is for external. So now when you turn the switched accessory input to pull it to plus 12, that accessory power will come on. Alternatively, if you want it to be a low side switch, say you want to put a horn relay in, or you want to use the solid state power box rather than a horn relay, your horn button is a low side control. You would then bring these two, rejumper them to the bottom, and now whenever you ground the input to the solid state power box, that accessory circuit will be powered and active. So that's about it in terms of the the jumpering. I guess that there was one other thing I didn't mention, is that there's another jumper here for the buzzer, but you'll find the buzzers are pretty muted. They're not real loud buzzer, and so there's probably no reason to disable it. The only other item here is the single point ground harness, and so just let me set this one off to the side, and I'll kind of show sort of the first thing you're going to want to do is to connect your solid state power box to your regulator here, and that's what I have here. This is a CompuFire, but I'd also recommend the CompuFire is a little more expensive, but they're a little smaller than the Polaris SH775, which is also a series, but they're much cheaper. The Polaris is only about $75 brand new, where these are closer to 170. So I purchased mine before the Polarises really came around. So they're both probably good units, probably pretty comparable, and so if you really want to save a little bit more money, and definitely if the $175 of the CompuFire is putting you off, do not let the small price of $75 for the SH775 hinder you from getting a series regulator, and it's definitely a good time to do it when you are installing your solid state power box, because you are basically marrying these two by having a direct connection on the red primary, because that's what this is. It's the RR plus is directly connected to the regulator, and that's because that's the source of the power, and the solid state power box is distributing that power. The other source of power that you have is your battery. That is going to be fused with a 15 amp fuse. Currently these are basically customized for the GS series of Suzukis, which really only need about a 15 amp fuse. Later on I can integrate these with a little bit higher amperage and see if we can step that up to 20. I'm pretty sure we can go up to 20 without any problems. The other wire here looks very much like a ground, and that's in fact what it is. So when you install this, you're going to be finding a mounting bolt. I think when I've installed it, I mounted the single point ground I'll just grab one of these bolts right here so we can see what's a little easier what's happening. I'd put this through, come through my single point ground, and then mount that to the upper corner. It's just as convenient. You could have put it on any other mounting hole. It doesn't matter really where it goes because the wire is a fixed length, and that's really the only thing that's kind of critical here. So, but with this 14 gauge wire, there's no reason to really make it any shorter. It's just, you know, it's a short enough length. It's inconsequential, having that amount of length makes it a little more convenient to find your common mounting point. Now the other wire that will come to this is usually the black-white from the harness. That's also the ground that's trying to get back. Remember, all your current that's coming to this point is going to get run over to the RR. And that's what this thick 14 gauge wire is. All three of these other wires are all 16 gauge, but are heavier wire to complement the red 14 gauge wire goes to our RR. So this is mounted on the typically your electronic side plate, so that both the RR and the solid state power box are shock mounted in rubber. And then we have two other wires, and these are a little bit longer because one will go to your battery ground, so you'll put that one to go right to your negative terminal of your battery, and then the other one will go somewhere on the frame, so that you're picking up any frame grounds that either from a blinker, or if you have a Dyna S, then it's trying to run all the return power for your ignition through your frame. So it's a good idea, regardless of whether you got a Dyna S or not. Just go ahead and do that, and now you're getting all the current coming back to your RR. You'll notice that really the current is not going back through the solid state power box. This other black wire is simply the ground for the control circuitry that's in the solid state power box to control all the power from the battery and the RR. So that pretty much covers the connection of the solid state power box to the RR and its grounding. So the other thing is going to be how you connect your harness basically to the solid state power box. So the 10-pin Molex has a numbering convention. The two red ones are here on the right, and those are going to be number 1 at the bottom and number 6 at the top. So it counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 running across from right to left, and then the top starts at 6 again and goes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 is the upper left. Okay, and all these pins correspond. If you go back to the website at the GS Resources, you'll see this sheet that represents the pin number 1 through 10 and the color coding for a pigtail, if you've got the pigtail, and the typical naming convention and where it's supposed to go to. There's a limited number of colors I had available. I basically had red and orange. Red indicates a primary, red wire, or I'm sorry, an unswitched or a primary red wire, and then the oranges represent the switched outputs, and then the other oddball colors like the white and the red and the green are switched inputs. The only other one is this. One of the reds here is really in fact a switched input, but it matches the red that you have on your harness. That's the primary that was going to your ignition switch. The connections also probably is an even better aid than this spreadsheet for making your connections, is this functional diagram that shows in the upper top 3 are the primary wires coming out the side, but all these numbered pins now are the Molex, and what it'll show is the color of the wire at the harness and then the color at the pigtail, and so you'll want to match those up. Again, all of the wires for orange green, orange white, and orange red, you're going to want to hook those up If you have either an unswitched power or a power outlet, you're going to hook that up to a red wire, and in this case that's the pin number 6. If you don't have an accessory or do have an accessory, you would hook that up according on pin 8. As far as the input side, your red and your orange, those are basically the red is the power that's going back to the ignition switch. It's just now happen to be a protected output from the solid-state power box. The orange is the output of the ignition switch being used to turn on the primary the signal circuit, the orange green. You're going to modify your kill switch to also provide the kill switch signal and bring it back to the fuse box, and I'd recommend using the green-white, which is an available wire in your harness. I think for the earlier bikes it's a different color, but I think it's a red, perhaps a red-white, but it's also in there. It's the stator loop wire. You'll also, if you want to dim your headlamp or kill your headlamp during the when you're cranking, you want to use a start switch output, which is the yellow-green, and you'll want to route that through this yellow wire to get it to the solid-state power box. The white-red is another spare wire along with the this green-white. It's the other spare wire from the headlamp loop. You're going to want to bring that into the green. At whenever point you decide how you want to wire your switched power for the accessory, whether it's high side or low side, you can connect that up, depending on if you have a switch on the handlebar or whatever. But it'll this white-red also comes out at the kill switch connector, which is in, I think for most bikes, probably in the headlamp bucket. And so that kind of brings us to the kill switch modifications. There's really only 3 things you have to do. This shows a before and after, and I've highlighted the main wires that have to be modified. So item number 1 is changing the kill switch in and hooking it up to the orange-green. And so what that means is that the kill switch now needs to be powered from a switch source. The switch source is the orange-green. That's the one that comes on when the key is going to come on. And the way you get there is we're going to first cut the 2 orange-greens from the connector. They're coming to this connector here. We cut them both off, and we bring one of them to this gray loop. And the gray loop is really the orange-green. Okay, that's now coming out of the solid-state power box. So that allows us to power our kill switch. Now the other wire, which is the output of the kill switch, needs to be routed back to the solid-state power box, and as we mentioned before, we're going to use that spare light green white wire, and so that second connection is to the light green white, which has been now cut. You notice here's the light green white going through a loop to the white with a red stripe. They've been cut, and the orange-white output of the kill switch is now connected to the light green white, so it can go back, and the white-red is available. So here is where if you followed the other connections at the fuse box, then you've got the red-white available so that you can control your horn or whatever you'd want to do with this. Those are cover the first 2 connections, and the final connection is the orange-white now. The orange-white with the red tab is what's coming from the solid-state power box now. We need to make sure that the rest of the ignition circuit is being powered. Remember before it was all being powered from through the kill switch, as we see here, but now we have to since that's been separated out, we have to just jumper this over. So the best place to do that is on the harness side. You could run, do the connection on the 2 wires you cut off on the back side. This would be on the part of the kill switch harness, but there's no point in going through basically 4 pins here, because you're going to have 4 crimps and the mechanical interference fit of the 2 connections, and that's just 6 connectors for that create more power loss for no point. And so connect these 2 wires, solder them with some heat shrink. that is really all. If you've got a standard fuse box with a main fuse from the battery, the ignition circuit, or the signal, ignition, and headlamp, and an accessory, then your harness is already basically set up to accommodate the solid-state power box. And the only thing we had to do for the ignition circuit was to do these three, and the kill switch was these three modifications, and they're all right in your headlamp. So I guess the only other thing we could do here is I could probably show you very quickly how the new box works. Let me close this up real quick so that I'm not sure how I'm connected. So we're going to be under a high side control from an external input. So that means you just, when you apply 12 volts to the accessory, just going to close this up real quick and hook it up. Okay, and for test purposes, I use this little cable. It seems to be adequate for the 10-15 amps that I pull during a test, and I'll hook this to the ground. And so the power is on. You see that we've got. Let me turn this down a little bit so that when we're in, your bike is sitting with the turn these off. So when your bike is sitting in park, you're going to have about, here we see about 13 volts at the battery. That's a little high. I'll maybe drop it a little bit so it's more. So let's say you're 12.8 at the battery. We've got 12.7 coming out of your switched output. So you would read a couple of tenths low, and this is with an amp of load. Here you can see now that if I drop that current demand on your unswitched, say you're on your power switch, you're hardly going to get that. Turn that a little bit down so I can see the video is a little bit bad. Okay, you can see here this is like an 80 milliamp draw. There's almost no drop on the output to the battery or the unswitched power. So now I turn my ignition switch on. I've got a little bit more drop, about 3/10 to the ignition circuit. My headlamp is on, but my ignition is not on because I don't have the kill switch on. I turn the kill switch on, and now everything is powered, and I want to now start the bike. And when I turn the switch on, my start switch, I cut my headlamp out, and the bike will now start. And I turn the switch off, and the voltage will rise based on my idle speed. I've just pushed this up to about 14, and so you see that we're running in the high 13s on all of the outputs. And when I switch my accessory to high up, which is applying the 12 volts, I have 13.5 volts plus on all of the outputs, all 5 channels. Now, again, with my solid-state fuse box production test station here, I can apply larger loads. So what I'm showing here on the accessories, I'm pulling 7.5 amps for that accessory. That means a total of 11.5 amps is coming through the solid-state power box. I can push this up. I'll go ahead and run this all the way up to the max, and I do the same thing on my headlamp. 7.5 amps here we see on the headlamp, a total of about 11.7 amps for the whole thing. So I can go through and do this on each one of them. Now, in addition, I can show, and if we can see the what has happened here with the solid-state fuse box, is that when I turn the ignition switch off, you see that the LED, the green LED, came off. When I turn it on, the LED goes green. Now I'm going to go over here and use my other single hand. I put a load on, and now I'm showing what happens when there's a short. So I'm basically shorting that output. This is not a direct short. It's pulling about, I think, if it was allowed, if the solid-state power box was not cutting out, it would be approximately about 13 to 14 amps, which exceeds the 10 amps that each channel is supposed to provide. So I let that go. I can go back and I've restored it back. I'm pulling 7 amps here. You can see. Let me get back over here a little bit. You can see here I've got 7 amps, 7.5 amps, and everything's fine with the green. And I ground the wire out and I return back. Okay, so this is showing again the functionality. You can see the functionality now with the LEDs, and even though I was holding that thing down for, I don't know, 20-15 seconds, this thing is not even, it's cold. It's not, I wouldn't even call it room temperature. I think I'm at about 65 degrees in here in the shop. So it didn't, there's no perceptible rise in temperature. So if you have this thing mounted on a piece of aluminum, your side plate or your steel side plate, you're just not going to see much of a rise unless you just leave this thing overnight shorted. So that's about it for the demonstration, and we hope you guys guys and girls can get these things integrated. And if you got any questions, you know how to contact me, solidstatepowerbox@gmail.com, or you can post questions over at the GS Resources. So, all right, everybody, thanks a lot.